My name is Rachel. One Christmas dinner in Ohio, my mother told me to move out of the house I'd been paying for. She thought I had no options. She was wrong, and everything unraveled from there. If you've faced family turning on you, share your experience in the comments. The table was already crowded with plates when my mother said it, her fork halfway to her mouth. After the holidays, you need to move out. This house doesn't have room for someone who doesn't contribute. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She didn't wait for a response either. The sentence landed, then she went back to chewing, as if she'd just reminded someone to pass the salt. My hand stopped above the plate. No argument came out. No questions followed. A cousin stared down at his food. An aunt cleared her throat and reached for more gravy. Someone's phone buzzed, quickly silenced. No one stepped in. Margaret swallowed and dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "This isn't a discussion," she added, still focused on her plate. "I'm just letting you know ahead of time." Chairs shifted. Silverware scraped. The turkey cooled. I pushed my chair back and stood. No announcement, no dramatic pause. The sound of the legs against the floor cut through the table chatter that never quite restarted. From my bag, I took out a slim envelope and returned to my seat. The envelope slid across the table and stopped near her elbow. "You might want to read Section 2, Paragraph 3, I said. Margaret glanced at it, annoyed, as if I'd interrupted something important. She opened the flap without looking at me. The paper unfolded once, then again. Her jaw kept moving until it didn't. The fork stayed raised. Chewing paused, suspended. Eyes traveled down the page. The room didn't react. No gasps, no questions, just the low hum of the refrigerator working overtime in December. The document sat flat between us. My name was printed at the top, clear and boring in the way legal text always is. Owner. Sole. Recorded. She set the fork down. "That can't be right," Margaret said. "Not to me, but to the paper." "It is," I replied. A cousin reached for more potatoes, then thought better of it and pulled his hand back. Someone refilled a glass without asking. The clock over the sink clicked forward. Margaret looked up at last. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You went behind my back." "I paid the mortgage," came the answer. The words stayed level, almost administrative. Her chair scraped as she shifted. "This is my house." I pulled my glass closer and poured myself more wine. The bottle was lighter than it had been earlier. "I'm not moving," I said. "You are." The sentence didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed and stayed where it fell. Across the table, someone laughed once, too quickly, like a reflex that misfired. Margaret stared at the page again, as if rereading might change the order of the names. The turkey knife rested beside her plate, unused. Plates were passed. A question about dessert floated up and drifted away, unanswered. Margaret folded the document with care, creasing it exactly where it had been before. "We'll talk about this later," she said. "Sure," I replied, lifting the glass. Plates disappeared into the sink one by one. Someone wrapped leftovers without asking who wanted them. Margaret stayed seated, phone already in hand, thumb moving before anyone reached the door. The first message came before the car warmed up. Then another. A third arrived while the streetlights slid past the windshield. Short questions, careful phrasing. No one asked what had happened. They asked what I'd done. By the time morning came, the story had shape. Margaret called relatives early, voice breaking at the right places. Words like betrayed and ungrateful traveled faster than facts. She didn't mention the envelope. She didn't say my name had been on the paperwork for years. She said she'd been blindsided at her own table. Work resumed the next day. The office smelled like burnt coffee and copier toner, business as usual. A few coworkers glanced over, then looked away. Someone asked if the holidays were good enough. The answer came out neutral. Meetings stayed on schedule. Spreadsheets didn't care. By lunch, Margaret started calling. "We need to talk," she said. Another call followed when that one went unanswered. "I raised you," she said in a voicemail, voice shaking. "Do you know what I gave up?" A third message arrived with a different tone. "This doesn't have to get ugly." That afternoon, she texted a photo of me at 8 years old, missing a front tooth. No caption. At work, a manager stopped by my desk and lowered his voice. "You okay?" A nod passed for an answer. He nodded back and kept walking. Deadlines still mattered. After hours, the bank lobby buzzed with end-of-year errands. Forms stacked on the counter, pens chained down like they might run. Daniel Ortiz waved me over with a tired smile that suggested he'd seen worse days. "Let's take a look," he said, pulling up the account. Screens flickered, numbers lined up neatly. Dates matched. Payments stretched back years. "Who's been sending these?" he asked. "My account," I said. "And the deed stayed the same?" "That's what I'm here to fix." Daniel nodded, not surprised. "Happens more than people think." He slid a document across the desk. "This confirms ownership. This schedules the rest." The printer jammed. Daniel sighed, fixed it, tried again. "System's a little backed up," he said. "Holidays." A notification chimed on his screen. He didn't read it aloud, but turned the monitor enough for me to see. Automated language. Polite. Precise. "Thank you for your submission." "Well," Daniel said, standing, "paperwork doesn't argue." And back home, messages multiplied. An aunt called to suggest compromise. "She's your mother," she said, as if that ended the conversation. A cousin sent a longer text about keeping the peace. Sometimes it's better to let things go. Another relative wrote nothing at all. Margaret switched tactics by evening. The calls softened. Tears replaced threats. "I'm sick over this," she said. "I can't sleep." She talked about the house like a person who'd been wronged, about how it held memories, about how neighbors would talk. "You wouldn't do this to me," she said. Silence answered back. The next day she showed up unannounced, standing by the door with a bag of old mail. "I found these," she said. "You never paid for everything." Receipts slid onto the counter, out of order. Some weren't even addressed to the house. A grocery bill from years ago. A utility statement with someone else's name on it. "This proves something," she insisted. "It proves you kept mail," came the reply. Her face tightened. "You're turning everyone against me." "No," I said. "Paper did that." At the bank, another email arrived while Daniel reviewed signatures. The subject line read, "Next steps." The body thanked me for patience during processing delays. Estimated completion time, 10 business days. A holiday greeting followed, cheerful and automatic. Daniel glanced at the screen and shook his head. They always add that. Add what? The greeting. Doesn't matter what's going on. Family dinner invitations stopped. Group chats went silent. One uncle sent a thumbs-up emoji with no context. Margaret left a final voicemail that night. "If you walk away from this, don't bother coming back," she said. The message ended before the sentence finished. Forms went out, calendars filled with appointments, names signed where they were supposed to be. Each confirmation arrived the same way. Neutral language, friendly closings, no acknowledgement of the mess underneath. By the end of the week, pressure came from every direction, steady and persistent. Work continued, the bank kept moving, phones buzzed and stopped. Dinner happened alone, standing at the counter, scrolling through unread messages while the microwave beeped again. The discrepancy showed up as a footnote. Daniel had printed a batch of old statements and spread them across the desk, tapping one line with a pen. The payment amount matched the transfers from my account, down to the cents. The label didn't. "This one was marked as a personal loan," he said, "not mortgage principal." "That makes no sense," I said. "It went to the same account, same day." Daniel leaned back and crossed his arms. "Someone categorized it differently. Not an accident you repeat for years." He flipped to the next page. Another payment. Same mislabel. Then another. "So," he added, careful with his tone, "either the bank messed up consistently or someone corrected it that way." Margaret chose that moment to call. The phone vibrated across the table. Daniel glanced at the name and raised an eyebrow without comment. I stepped away to answer. "This is getting ridiculous," she said before a greeting could land. "I spoke to someone. They said paperwork errors happen all the time." "Who did you speak to?" "A friend. He knows how these things work." Daniel watched from the desk as the answer traveled back. "There's a pattern," he said once the call ended. "That matters." Margaret didn't accept that explanation later. She preferred another version. "It's a technical issue," she insisted over dinner the following night. "Banks mess things up. You're overreacting." Plates clinked. No one contradicted her. No one agreed either. A cousin studied his drink like it might offer advice. "If it's technical," I said, "it should be easy to fix." Her jaw tightened. "You always think you know better." The next day, a message arrived from an unfamiliar number. A lawyer's name appeared below it, followed by a suggestion to resolve matters privately. Margaret forwarded the same message with a single line: "We can still be civil." Daniel read the text and nodded. "Classic," he said. "Pressure before clarity." Another document surfaced while he searched older records. A correction request filed years back. The signature wasn't mine. "That's not your handwriting," he said. "No," I replied. "Someone tried to reclassify payments retroactively," Daniel continued. "That's not routine." Margaret laughed when that detail came up. "You're accusing me now?" she asked. "After everything?" "I'm asking questions." "Well," she said, "my lawyer says you're making this bigger than it needs to be." Family conversations shifted tone. A sister-in-law asked careful questions about timelines. An uncle mentioned how complicated money could get after a death. No one said Margaret was wrong. No one said she was right. A letter arrived on thick paper 2 days later. Legal language, firm but polite. It warned against further interference. It suggested mediation. It closed with an offer to settle. Daniel skimmed it and shrugged. They want you to blink. Another email arrived while he spoke. Automated. Subject line, review in progress. Estimated response time, 4 to 6 weeks. A holiday graphic sat at the bottom, complete with snowflakes. They really commit to the theme, Daniel said. The delay stretched. Calls went unanswered. Messages stacked up. Margaret switched back to threats. "You don't want this on your record," she said. "People find out." "Find out what?" came the reply. "That you sued your own mother." No lawsuit existed yet. The accusation traveled faster than the truth. A cousin asked if things had gone legal. An aunt advised dropping it before reputation suffered. At the bank, Daniel explained options without persuasion. "A formal complaint triggers a deeper audit," he said. "It also means scrutiny for everyone. And if I don't, then nothing changes." Margaret left another voicemail that night. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, "over paperwork." The word paperwork stuck, as if years of payments were a clerical hobby. A final meeting filled the afternoon. Daniel placed the complaint form on the desk and slid it over. Boxes waited to be checked. Lines waited for ink. "This isn't a small step," he said. "Once filed, it moves on its own schedule." Phones buzzed. A text from Margaret appeared mid-sentence, promising consequences. Another, from a relative, suggested patience. Neither got answered. The pen felt lighter than expected. The signature took up less space than the arguments that came before it. Daniel stamped the page and fed it into the scanner. "Received," he said, glancing at the confirmation screen. "They'll be in touch." The printer hummed again. Another polite email followed, thanking me for cooperation and reminding everyone to expect delays during peak season. Daniel gathered the papers into a neat stack. "Welcome to the waiting part," he said. The key didn't turn. I tried again, slower this time, as if patience might help. Metal scraped, then stopped. The door stayed put. A neighbor's car rolled past and slowed, curiosity on display without effort. The phone came out. A message from Margaret waited at the top of the screen. "We needed space. This is temporary." A new lock glinted where the old one had been. No note, no warning, just a decision carried out while I was at work. The second key failed the same way. Someone across the street pretended to adjust a snow shovel that wasn't needed. Another curtain shifted. Word travels faster when it doesn't need details. I stepped back and called the non-emergency number. The operator asked for an address, then a reason. I'm locked out of my own house, I said. A pause followed. Are you the owner? Yes. Okay, she replied. An officer will stop by. Margaret didn't answer when the call went through. Voicemail picked up, cheerful and pre-recorded. A text followed, short and pointed. You didn't have to make this public. 2 officers arrived 10 minutes later. One took notes. The other tested the handle and nodded. Do you have proof of residence? The first asked. Documents came out of the bag. Copies, stamped pages. He scanned them without comment. This is a civil issue, he said, careful with each word, but we can document the lock change. Margaret appeared then, coat thrown on, hair pulled back too tight. This is unnecessary, she said. She's overreacting. The officer didn't argue. Ma'am, we're just recording what's here. She crossed her arms. This is my home. He looked at the papers again. Not according to this. A neighbor edged closer, phone angled down but ready. Another watched from a porch. Someone coughed, too loudly. Margaret shook her head. I can't believe you do this to me. No response came. The officer finished his report, handed over a case number, and wished everyone a good afternoon. He said it the way people do when the words mean nothing. The family line lit up by evening. Calls overlapped. Messages contradicted each other. You should have waited. This could have been handled privately. She's your mother. One voice suggested apologizing to smooth things over. Another warned about escalating conflict. No one mentioned the lock. A letter arrived the next morning by courier. Heavy paper again. This one requested that I refrain from accessing the property pending resolution. It cited disruption. It suggested consequences. Daniel read it at the bank and sighed. They're trying to freeze you out. Another email followed while we spoke. Subject line, account review. Certain actions temporarily paused. Thank you for understanding during this process. Holiday backlog, Daniel said. Bad timing. So it's frozen? Partially, he replied. Standard during investigations. Margaret called that night, voice steady. You've made things difficult, she said. My attorney says you should stop. Stop what? Showing up. A pause. You can stay somewhere else until this is over. The suggestion landed like a favor. That evening ended with a duffel bag and a spare room offered by a coworker who asked no questions. Shoes lined up by the door. A couch cleared of mail. Someone joked about house rules, then changed the subject. At the bank, the printer jammed again. Daniel fixed it without looking up. Once this moves, it moves, he said. Until then, it's stuck. Any timeline? He shook his head. Depends how hard the other side pushes. Margaret pushed hard. Another letter followed, then another. Each used calmer language than the last, like practice. Family members forwarded them with notes that said, just so you know. A cousin asked if I planned to let this go. An aunt wondered how long the couch situation would last. Someone else suggested renting nearby, as if geography solved ownership. Work continued. Meetings ended on time. Emails thanked everyone for flexibility. The system never missed a beat. A final notice from the bank arrived late afternoon. Processing extended. Please do not contact your branch for updates. Automated signature at the bottom, complete with a seasonal greeting. Daniel forwarded it with a single line. This means they're digging. Night settled into routine. A borrowed mug, a borrowed charger, texts unanswered. Shoes by the door again, ready to leave in the morning. The phone buzzed once more. A message from Margaret appeared and disappeared as it was read. You didn't have to force my hand. The requests arrived in batches. First came the bank's notice, formal and dense, asking for explanations that stretched back years. Dates, amounts, source of funds, attached supporting documents. A deadline followed, polite and firm, like a hand on the shoulder guiding someone toward an exit. Then the family calls picked up again, louder this time. Not curious anymore, decisive. She's been crying non-stop, an aunt said. You know what this is doing to her, a cousin added. Just pick a side so this can end. Margaret made sure everyone heard her version. She spoke about loss, about grief, about being abandoned after my father died. At a Sunday gathering I didn't attend, someone put the phone on speaker so I could listen. I don't even recognize her, Margaret said, voice breaking on cue. I raised her to be better than this. A pause followed, filled by sympathetic murmurs. She wants to destroy what we built, she continued, over money. No one mentioned the lock. No one mentioned the paperwork. The story traveled light. At the bank, Daniel lined up folders across his desk. Each held a year. Some held more than one. They want clarity, he said. You can give it. And if I don't, they'll keep asking. Another letter arrived from Margaret's attorney while we spoke. It proposed mediation again. It warned about reputational harm. It ended with a line about preserving family dignity. Daniel glanced at it and slid it aside. They're framing this as emotional, he said. Banks don't speak that language. The requests kept coming. Pay stubs, transfers, notes scribbled on envelopes years ago, screenshots pulled from old emails. Everything had to be labeled, dated, explained. At night, the couch arrangements settled into routine. A lamp stayed on while documents spread across the table. Someone in the apartment joked about charging rent. The joke didn't land, but it passed. You can stay as long as you need, my coworker said. Just don't forget your charger again. Family messages continued in parallel. Some arrived carefully worded, others skipped manners. You're choosing money over blood, one read. Another followed minutes later. She's your mother. You'll regret this. Margaret called once, late. I don't know who put these ideas in your head, she said, but you're not thinking straight. No one put anything there, I replied. She sighed, long and heavy. So you're really doing this? I already did. At work, a manager asked if the situation had calmed down. The question hovered, vague enough to retreat if needed. The answer stayed neutral. Projects moved forward. Deadlines didn't care who cried at dinner. The bank scheduled a call with a review team. 3 voices joined the line, introductions crisp. We're following up on your complaint, one said. This is routine. Routine took 2 hours. Why were these payments categorized differently? Who initiated the correction? Can you confirm access to the account at that time? Answers came in full sentences, supported by files already sent. They listened without reaction. We'll be in touch, they said at the end. Please don't make additional changes during the review. A follow-up email arrived seconds later, thanking me for cooperation and wishing a pleasant week. Daniel forwarded it with a note. That's as warm as it gets. Margaret escalated publicly after that. She showed up at a family birthday uninvited and cried through the cake cutting. She told anyone who would listen that she'd been forced out of her own home. Someone recorded part of it and sent the clip around, context trimmed away. You've gone too far, an uncle texted. You could still fix this. Fix meant retreat. Fix meant apology without terms. At the bank, Daniel laid out the next step. If you withdraw the complaint now, he said, the review stops. And if I don't, it continues, and it won't be gentle. The form sat between us again, thinner this time. A box to check, a signature line. This will make things louder, he added, before they get clearer. The decision didn't arrive as a rush. It showed up as a series of small acknowledgments stacked together. The lock that had changed without notice, the letters that spoke around facts, the way grief had been used like a passkey. The years of assuming responsibility would be seen without being recorded. I thought doing the right thing would count, I said. Daniel nodded once. It counts, he said, just not where you expected. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Margaret, this one shorter. If you don't stop, don't call me your family. The pen moved across the page. Ink dried fast. Daniel scanned the form and hit send. "Filed," he said. "They'll reach out." Outside, errands continued as usual. Groceries, gas, a stoplight that took too long. The couch waited back at the apartment. Documents returned to the folder, thinner than before. A final text came through from a relative as the car pulled into the lot. "You've made your choice." The call came from the bank on a Tuesday afternoon, scheduled but still abrupt. 3 voices joined the line. Titles followed names, then a pause that carried weight without saying so. "We've completed a preliminary review," one of them said. "There's an issue we need to clarify." Daniel listened beside me, pen resting on a closed folder. "Several documents list the source of mortgage payments as personal loans," the voice continued. "Those classifications don't align with the actual transfers." Silence stayed on the line long enough to notice. "Who signed those corrections?" came the next question. "Margaret Morgan," I said. Another pause. "That's what our records show." Daniel exhaled through his nose and scribbled a note. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," the voice replied, choosing each word, "that inaccurate information was knowingly submitted." A follow-up email arrived before the call ended. Subject line, "Potential civil exposure." No exclamation points, no urgency in the font, just facts lined up neatly. "We're obligated to continue this review," the caller added. "Depending on findings, this may extend beyond internal correction." The line disconnected without ceremony. Daniel closed the folder. "That's the shift," he said. "This isn't about family anymore." Another message arrived minutes later, this one from Margaret's attorney. Short, controlled, an invitation to resolve matters discreetly. "Discreet how?" Daniel asked, reading over my shoulder. "They want silence," I said. He nodded. "Usually means leverage slipped." Margaret called before the hour passed. "You need to stop this," she said, skipping greetings. "This is getting dangerous." "Dangerous for who?" A sharp breath followed. "They're talking about fraud. That's extreme." "They're talking about paperwork," I replied. "You know what I meant," she said. "You don't want this on my record." "My name isn't the one they flagged." She lowered her voice then, careful. "We can fix this. Quietly. I'll transfer the title. We'll say it was delayed. No one else needs to know." Daniel listened, eyes steady. "That should have happened years ago," I said. Margaret's tone tightened. "So you'd rather ruin me?" "No," I said. "I'd rather not undo the process now." She laughed once, sharp and brief. "You always did this. Act like you're above it." The call ended without agreement. The next bank meeting took place in person. A conference room, water bottles untouched. The review team laid out findings without drama. 87% of payments originated from your account, one analyst said. The remainder came from joint funds after your father's death. Another slid over a chart. The title transfer was requested multiple times and withdrawn. Daniel tapped the paper. By Margaret. "That's correct." "So the delay wasn't procedural," he said. "No." They outlined possible outcomes next: corrections, penalties, referrals. Each item presented the same way, as if reading a menu. "Our responsibility is accuracy," one of them said. "Intent matters." The meeting ended with a handshake and a reminder not to contact Margaret directly. Outside, messages waited. Family members asking if it was true the bank was involved. Someone forwarded a rumor about charges. Another asked if there was anything that could be done to calm this down. Margaret tried again that night, softer this time. "I was trying to protect myself," she said. "After your father died, everything felt unstable." "You protected control," I said. She didn't deny it. "You can still stop this," she said. "Just tell them it was a misunderstanding." "They didn't misunderstand," I replied. Her voice broke then, uneven. "I'm your mother." That didn't change the file. The attorney followed up with a longer email outlining terms. Silence. Mutual release. No admission. It closed with a reminder about family considerations. Daniel read it and shook his head. They're negotiating fear, he said, not facts. Another notice arrived from the bank before the day ended. The review would continue under a separate department. Additional documentation might be required. Estimated timeline? Undetermined. A standard disclaimer followed, thanking everyone for cooperation. They always thank you, Daniel said, no matter how bad it gets. Margaret sent one last message that week. If this goes further, don't expect forgiveness. The phone stayed on the table. No reply went out. Folders moved from one bag to another. Appointments filled the calendar. The couch remained available, offered without comment. At work, deadlines held firm. Conversations stayed surface level. At the bank, a clerk called my name and asked for a signature. Another page joined the stack. This just authorizes continued review, she said. Nothing changes today. The pen moved across the line. Ink dried fast. The receipt printed with a soft whir. A date stamped at the bottom. A phrase in bold. Under investigation. Have a good afternoon, the clerk said, already turning to the next person. Keys jingled on the way out. The parking ticket expired by 3 minutes. A small fee waited at the exit booth, collected without comment. The phone buzzed once more as the car pulled into traffic. An automated alert confirmed the case number and advised patience. Dinner plans shifted again. Groceries sat in the trunk longer than intended. At the apartment, the couch was cleared and the folder set down beside it, thicker now than it had been before, already past the point of return. Paperwork stopped feeling like a threat and started behaving like a tool. The final batch went out on a Monday morning. Bank statements, transfer logs, copies of emails that had never been answered. Every request met with a response. Every gap filled. Daniel checked the list twice, then once more, without speaking. That should do it, he said, sliding the folder back. There's nothing left to clarify. A confirmation arrived before noon. The review team acknowledged receipt and noted completion of submissions. No commentary, no reassurance. Just a line stating that determinations would follow. Margaret's attorney shifted tone after that. The next message dropped the talk of mediation and focused on logistics. No more warnings, no appeals to dignity, just questions about timelines and access. They're adjusting, Daniel said. That's not confidence. The bank followed up with its own notice. Ownership confirmed, control recognized, any prior restrictions lifted. Another polite closing thanked me for patience. They always thank you at the end, Daniel said, no matter how long it took. Family messages slowed. The loudest voices quieted first. A cousin asked if the bank had sorted things out. An aunt wanted to know what would happen to the house now. The questions came without judgment, stripped of advice. Margaret didn't call anymore. Communication moved through attorneys. Requests arrived formatted and careful. Access schedules, item retrieval, deadlines. She can remove personal belongings, the email said, by appointment. The house was no longer a place she decided things about. The first time standing in the driveway again felt procedural. A locksmith waited with paperwork ready. Margaret's lawyer arrived early, briefcase closed, expression neutral. This won't take long, he said. It didn't. The lock changed again, this time with authorization. Margaret watched from the sidewalk, arms folded, saying nothing. No argument followed, no scene. The neighbors pretended to be busy. You'll receive a copy of the new keys, the lawyer said to her, for retrieval only. She nodded once, sharp. At the bank, a clerk confirmed the update and slid over a receipt. Everything matches now, she said. You're all set. A stamp landed on the page. Finalized. Daniel glanced at the date. They closed it clean. And her lawyer? He stopped calling. Margaret sent one last message through counsel. It asked for time. It asked for grace. It asked to avoid further complications. The system already decided, Daniel said. You're not the one escalating anymore. Family gatherings resumed without invitations extended. Conversations picked up around other topics. The story lost interest once paperwork settled it. Without drama, there wasn't much to discuss. A relative forwarded a group email confirming that Margaret would be staying elsewhere for now. The wording avoided names. No one asked questions. At work, a project wrapped on schedule. A manager thanked everyone for flexibility. Lunch happened at the desk. Nothing changed there. The bank scheduled a final call to explain outcomes. The same calm voices, the same careful language. Our findings support the documentation provided, one said. No further action is required on your part. And on hers, Daniel asked. That will be addressed separately. The line went silent, then disconnected. The house stood unchanged. Utilities transferred, insurance updated. A service notice arrived reminding me to set up automatic payments. Another email confirmed enrollment and welcomed me as the account holder. Welcome, Daniel read aloud. They have a way with timing. Margaret's attorney confirmed move-out logistics, dates, boxes, supervision required. No direct contact requested. She doesn't get to decide anymore, Daniel said. That's the difference. On the scheduled day, Margaret arrived with a small car and 2 suitcases. No argument followed, no raised voices. She carried what she could and left the rest. I'll come back for those, she said to the lawyer. We'll coordinate, he replied. The door closed behind her without ceremony. Keys sat in my hand afterward, lighter than expected. The house felt less like a victory and more like a file that had finally been closed. Another email arrived from the bank before evening. Case concluded. Records updated. A short survey followed, asking about satisfaction with the process. They always ask, Daniel said when I forwarded it. The last appointment took 15 minutes. A receptionist slid a clipboard across the counter and pointed to 2 lines. No small talk, no questions. The attorney glanced over the pages, nodded once, and said the filings were complete. That was it. No ceremony attached to endings like this. An email arrived before I reached the elevator. Subject line, case closed. The body thanked me for cooperation, confirmed records had been updated, and noted that no further action was required. The tone stayed pleasant, almost cheerful. At the bottom, a seasonal line appeared, automatically appended. Happy holidays. The timing felt deliberate, even though it wasn't. Margaret's consequences settled without drama. She moved out within the window her attorney requested, a smaller place across town. No forwarding address shared. The house keys were returned through counsel, counted, and logged. Retrieval dates were scheduled for remaining items. Supervised. Efficient. Her financial file told the rest of the story. Corrections noted. Irregularities flagged. Nothing cinematic. Just a record that would follow her the way records do. Family reactions shifted quietly. No one defended her anymore. No one asked me to fix things. Invitations stopped coming to both of us. Conversations avoided names. The silence wasn't kind, but it was final. There was no last talk, no closing argument. Communication stayed contained to emails and signatures when required. When Margaret's attorney asked whether reconciliation was on the table, the response went out in one line. Please direct all correspondence through counsel. Work returned to normal. A project timeline needed adjustment, a site meeting ran long. A vendor missed a deadline and apologized. My role stayed the same. No explanation offered. None requested. The house needed management, not emotion. Contracts replaced assumptions. A property manager reviewed terms. Insurance policies updated. Utilities transferred. Automatic payments set. The place became an asset with boundaries instead of a battleground. Neighbors adjusted quickly. A wave here, a nod there. Curiosity faded once there was nothing left to watch. The bank sent another message a week later. A confirmation, redundant but thorough. Records archived. Access permissions finalized. The email ended the same way as the others. Thank you for choosing us. Daniel forwarded it with a note. They really stick the landing. No response went back. A final letter from Margaret's attorney arrived after that, brief and factual. It acknowledged completion of move-out and requested confirmation of receipt for stored items. No language about family, no emotion embedded. I signed and returned it the same day. The house felt different afterward, not lighter, not warmer, just defined. Rooms used for what they were meant to be used for. A table without negotiations attached to it. Locks that stayed the same. The couch at the apartment was returned with thanks. A plant left behind as a joke. Keys changed hands. Life condensed back into routines. At the office, a manager stopped by and asked if everything had wrapped up. The question didn't require details. Yeah, I said. It did. He nodded and moved on. Another email from the bank came that afternoon, unrelated to the case. A survey link asked about satisfaction with recent service. 5 options. None seemed appropriate. The message stayed unread. The only time Margaret's name came up again was indirect. A relative mentioned she was doing okay and left it there. No one asked for updates. No one volunteered sympathy. That night, dinner happened without urgency. Groceries unpacked, a bill paid, a calendar reminder dismissed. Normal tasks reclaimed the space where crisis had lived. The next morning started early. A meeting downtown. Coffee purchased and forgotten halfway through. Traffic stalled, then cleared. A radio host joked about winter weather and moved on. At the law office, the elevator doors opened to the lobby and closed again behind me. The exit sign pointed the way it always had. Outside, people passed without noticing. There wasn't relief in the way movies describe it. No swell, no release, just the absence of noise. The phone buzzed once more as the street came into view. Another automated notice from the bank confirmed that the account remained in good standing. A final line wished me a pleasant day. It was, in its own way. Keys slipped into a pocket. The sidewalk carried me forward. Appointments waited, work needed doing. The house existed, managed and contained. Nothing had been won, nothing needed proving. The system had finished speaking.